okay? And to do that, you want to pray together every day. You want to share feelings. We've talked about this on other shows. Share your feelings every day. Praise each other. Say, you're awesome. I love this about you every day.
Yeah.
You know, my wife Lisa's here today, and we do this. We'll do it tonight. We did it last night. We'll do it the night after that.
April 4th, 2022, he was on camera, he was warm, he was wearing his wedding ring, and his divorce had already been filed for 10 weeks. There is a detail in the documented timeline of Doug Weiss's entry into Daystar Television's orbit that does not get nearly enough attention. On April 4th, 2022, 58 days after Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of more than 30 years, he appeared on the Daystar program Ministry Now alongside Joni Lamb. The two exchanged pleasantries. Joni asked how Colorado was doing. He said it was fantastic. No allergies. Clear air. She laughed. He was warm, engaging, the same expert on marriage and healing who had appeared on Daystar programming for years. There was nothing unusual about the episode on its surface, except for one thing. In that April 4th appearance, Doug Weiss was still wearing his wedding ring. His divorce from Lisa Weiss would not be finalized for another 7 weeks. And at some point after the episode aired, it was quietly removed from Daystar's website. Not archived, not labeled as older content, you cannot find it on the platform anymore. That disappearance, and what it implies about the relationship that was already forming between Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb, long before either acknowledged any connection to the public, is where this story begins. Doug Weiss has denied wrongdoing in connection with his counseling practices and his personal conduct. The Colorado State Board actions referenced in this video are matters of public record. Former client accounts were published by the Roy's Report with named sourcing. Property records, divorce. This video is about the documented record of Doug Weiss, not the speculation, not the rumors, not the commentary channel theories, but the time-stamped, sourced, publicly verifiable trail that runs from a January 2022 divorce filing through a June 2023 wedding to a March 2026 quitclaim deed, and asks what all of it means for the people who trusted him as a counselor, as a minister, and as the husband of one of Christian broadcasting's most influential figures. The story of how Doug Weiss became the most scrutinized figure in Christian television does not begin with Joni Lamb. It begins with a counseling model that had been drawing criticism long before the name Daystar entered the conversation. Doug Weiss is the founder and executive director of Heart to Heart Counseling Center in Colorado Springs, Colorado, an organization that markets itself as a leading resource for sexual addiction recovery, betrayal trauma treatment, and what Weiss calls intimacy anorexia therapy. For years, Weiss built a national reputation through books, speaking engagements, Daystar appearances, and a counseling intensive program that charged clients thousands of dollars for 3 to 5 day residential sessions. The pitch was compelling precisely because the pain it addressed is real. Broken marriages, affairs, pornography addiction, the specific devastation that sexual betrayal leaves in a family. These are real wounds, and couples in that kind of pain are genuinely desperate for help. Heart to Heart presented itself as a place where that help could be found quickly and comprehensively. And the credential behind the marketing, a Christian psychologist, a Daystar regular, an author of more than 40 books, carried real weight with an audience that had been given no reason to question it. What the Roy's Report found when it investigated the counseling intensives was considerably more complicated. In a detailed investigation published in late 2024, reporter Julie Roys documented testimony from multiple former clients, both men and women, who described their experiences at Heart to Heart as leaving them more traumatized than when they arrived, not less. Former clients described a methodology that felt less like therapeutic care and more like a structured process that served the counseling model's internal logic rather than the emotional needs of the people going through it. Multiple women described being subjected to what they characterized as a forced recitation of their husband's offenses, detailed, clinical, comprehensive, in joint sessions, followed almost immediately by pressure to forgive and reconcile. Women described leaving those sessions shattered rather than stabilized. They described a process in which biblical language about forgiveness and covenant was wielded not to bring genuine healing, but to move couples toward a predetermined outcome. Some described being told that if the husband passed a polygraph test, the wife was now obligated to forgive him and resume the marriage. The framing was theological on the surface. The former clients described it as coercive underneath. This is not simply the nature of difficult therapy. Effective betrayal trauma treatment, built on research by clinicians including Dr. Barbara Steffens and formalized through organizations such as the Association of Partners of Sex Addicts Trauma Specialists, is grounded in the client's readiness and agency. Partners of sexually addicted spouses experience a trauma response clinically comparable to post-traumatic stress disorder. Forcing a traumatized person to sit through a comprehensive inventory of their abuser's offenses and then applying immediate pressure to forgive is not evidence-based trauma care. The clinical term for it is re-traumatization. The Weiss report's former clients described exactly that experience, using exactly that word. Multiple former clients told the Weiss report that their marriages did not improve after the heart-to-heart intensive. Several said the experience actively damaged their ability to trust professional counseling going forward. Heart-to-Heart Counseling Center did not respond to messages seeking a response to the allegations, according to the Weiss report. Weiss requested questions by email, but did not respond to most of them. And the Colorado State Board of Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners agreed, at least in part, with the picture those former clients were painting. Public records, identified and analyzed in detail by accountability researchers following the Daystar controversy, show that Doug Weiss received 2 formal admonitions from the Colorado Licensing Board. These are public documents, not allegations, not commentary channel speculation. Official disciplinary records from the body that oversees professional counseling licensure in his home state. The first formal letter of admonition was issued in November 2002. The board found that Weiss had misrepresented his professional credentials, specifically by using the title Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, which is a distinct licensure category he did not hold. According to Colorado's professional licensing database, Weiss has been a licensed professional counselor since 2000 and a licensed psychologist since 2008. He is not and has never been a licensed marriage and family therapist. A licensed professional presenting himself using a credential he has not earned is not a minor labeling error. It directly affects clients' ability to evaluate the qualifications of the person they are trusting with their most vulnerable problems. The second admonition was issued in 2010. The Colorado Boards of Psychologists and Licensed Professional Counselor Examiners issued a final agency order stating that Weiss had not met generally accepted standards of his professional discipline during a 3-day intensive in 2008. The order stated, in the board's own language, that rather than de-escalating conflict, assessing the situation appropriately, and working to preserve the couple's marriage, Weiss had instead become an executioner of the marriage, rushing the couple into discussions about ending it, distributing marital assets, and writing goodbye letters to their dreams and to each other. The board found that he failed to implement appropriate therapeutic interventions, mediation, conflict resolution, goal setting, and emotional processing that professional standards required. Weiss accepted and agreed to that order on November 23, 2010. 2 formal admonitions from a state licensing authority represent a significant accountability finding against any licensed professional. For a man whose entire public ministry rested on the claim of healing expertise, whose credential was the foundation of his Daystar presence, his book sales, his intensive program fees, they are documents that his clients and his broadcast audience deserved to know existed. They did not know, because Daystar's platform gave him credibility without vetting his record. Marcus Lamb died on November 30th, 2021. He was 64 years old, and his death from COVID-19 complications came after he had been a prominent and vocal opponent of COVID vaccination, a position he maintained publicly on Daystar programming to the end. The network Joni Lamb inherited as its sole president and executive was valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars, with a reach that at its peak touched more than 100 million homes. She inherited that network, that responsibility, and that grief simultaneously. And 58 days later, on January 27, 2022, Doug Weiss filed for divorce from Lisa Weiss, his wife of more than 30 years. The divorce was finalized on May 31, 2022. That 58-day timeline is a documented fact, confirmed by court records and reported by multiple independent investigators. It is not by itself proof of any improper relationship. 2 people can make independent major life decisions in proximity without those decisions being connected, but it becomes considerably harder to treat as coincidental when you add the next documented item in the sequence. In March 2022, while Doug Weiss was still legally married to Lisa Weiss, his divorce petition having been filed for approximately 6 weeks, Joni Lamb purchased a building lot in Colorado Springs. The purchase is a matter of public property record. The lot was located near Doug Weiss's residence and ministry operation. At the time of her death, Trinity Foundation's investigators documented that Joni had owned 7 properties across 4 states valued at approximately $11.7 million. She did not need a Colorado building lot for housing purposes. The purchase, viewed alongside the timing of the Weiss divorce filing and the subsequently deleted April episode, forms a pattern in the documented record that raises straightforward questions about when the personal relationship between Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss actually began, as opposed to when it was publicly acknowledged. Joni herself, in on-air comments that became significant once the relationship was made public, described the beginning of her communication with Doug Weiss as following after his divorce announcement, saying, in her own words, that he told her he was divorced, and that is when they started talking after that. The April 4th episode, Still Wearing His Ring, 3 months into the divorce filing, directly contradicts the framing that they only began talking once the divorce was finalized. Daystar's decision to remove that episode from its platform did not erase the record. Independent viewers had already documented it, and the episode's existence in that time window has been confirmed by multiple individuals who watched it at the time of broadcast. The sequence, death, divorce filing, property purchase, filmed appearance with wedding ring intact, deleted episode, wedding eye, is the documentary record. No single item in that sequence is speculation. Each is individually verified by named sources or public filings. Together, they describe a timeline whose internal logic the public statements made about the relationship do not adequately explain. Joni Lamb and Doug Weiss married on June 10, 2023, 18 months after Marcus Lamb's death and just over a year after Doug's divorce from Lisa was finalized. The speed of that timeline and the specific person Joni had chosen to marry created deep fractures within the Lamb family that have been documented in detail across this series and in the Roy's Report's extensive coverage. Jonathan Lamb and his wife Susie raised concerns about the relationship, about Doug Weiss's professional record, and about the management of Daystar following Marcus's death. The institutional response to those concerns included surveillance, a GPS tracker placed in Jonathan's company vehicle, and the NDA ultimatum of November 2023, in which Daystar's board told Jonathan to sign or be removed from his executive position. He refused. He was fired. The termination letter delivered by a guard in a bulletproof vest. Those events have been covered thoroughly in previous installments of this series, all linked below. What this video focuses on is the question that has received comparatively less attention. What did Joni Lamb herself come to believe about her marriage to Doug Weiss in the final months of her life? The documented record, while incomplete, tells a partial story that is difficult to interpret any other way than it reads. Before we reach the quitclaim deed, there is one more documented thread that matters for understanding the broader credibility landscape of this story, the question of a sleepover. Josh Brown, in response to the child sexual abuse allegations made against him by Jonathan and Susie Lamb, stated flatly and publicly that Jonathan and Susie's children had never spent the night at his and Rachel's home. Never happened. That denial was delivered emphatically and as a matter of stated record. It was then directly contradicted by what the Roy's Report documented, namely Rachel Lamb Brown's own Instagram stories from the period in question, which multiple independent viewers of Daystar programming remembered watching at the time of original broadcast. Those stories depicted what appeared to be exactly such a sleepover occasion, with Rachel expressing what was described as the pride of an aunt, given the trust of her brother and sister-in-law. Multiple viewers, independently and without coordination, contacted platforms covering the story to say they specifically remembered Rachel discussing the sleepover on Daystar programming before she and Josh had children of their own, describing her excitement about it as a proud aunt moment. The Roy's Report documented the existence of the denial alongside the viewer recollections in its coverage of the police interview materials. In the context of a pattern that also includes a deleted broadcast episode, revised public statements about when a relationship began, and a network that has not publicly addressed its own documented financial records, the weight of any flat denial from within that institutional structure carries considerably less than it otherwise would. When the documentary record consistently shows a gap between what is stated publicly and what the time-stamped evidence shows, that pattern becomes the story, as much as any individual item within it. Trinity Foundation's meticulous investigation of Joni Lamb's estate restructuring found that in the year before her death, Joni sold 3 of her 7 properties and moved 4 others into a trust. That kind of deliberate estate restructuring, as Trinity Foundation noted, is consistent with someone preparing for death. Organizing assets to flow in specific directions, according to specific wishes, according to specific intentions, about who would and would not benefit. The most direct documented evidence on this question is the quitclaim deed. In March 2026, approximately 8 weeks before her death on May 7th, Joni Lamb signed a quitclaim deed removing Doug Weiss from the ownership title of the couple's Gulfront condominium in Miramar Beach, Florida. That deed is a matter of public property record, reported by the Roy's Report and confirmed by Trinity Foundation. The property had been purchased together in September 2023, 3 months after their wedding, at a value of approximately $2.9 million. March 2026. Joni Lamb signs quitclaim deed. Doug Weiss removed from title of $2.9 million Miramar Beach condo. Joni Lamb is in the final stages of metastatic bone cancer. She will die 8 weeks later. Source: Public Property Record / The Roy's Report / Trinity Foundation. A quitclaim deed is not a passive or accidental act. It is deliberate, legally consequential, and it requires intention. It requires calling an attorney. It requires reviewing a document. It requires understanding what you are doing and deciding, in full possession of that understanding, to do it anyway. Joni Lamb was in the final stages of metastatic bone cancer when she signed it. The deed does not tell us what she was thinking. It does not come with an attached explanation. No public statement accompanies it in the record, but it is a documented fact, publicly recorded, independently verified, that she took a deliberate legal action to remove her husband from a significant marital asset approximately 2 months before she died. Combined with the broader estate restructuring documented by Trinity Foundation, the sale of 3 properties, the transfer of 4 others into a trust, it draws a picture of a woman making careful decisions about where her assets would flow and who would benefit from them, decisions that systematically protected those assets from her husband's reach. The public record does not yet tell us what Joni Lamb came to understand about her marriage to Doug Weiss in those final months. The quitclaim deed is the record's closest answer to that question, and it speaks more clearly than any statement she could have made on camera, which brings us, ultimately, to the question this entire saga demands that Christian viewers and donors sit with. Doug Weiss built his public ministry on the premise that he was an expert in healing broken trust, in marriages damaged by addiction, infidelity, and deception. He presented himself for years as a guide through exactly the kind of pain that the Daystar audience struggled with. His counseling intensives charged thousands of dollars on the promise of transformation. His on-air presence at Daystar gave him a platform of extraordinary reach within the charismatic Christian world. And yet the documented record, the state board admonitions, the former client accounts published by the Roy's Report, the deleted episode, the divorce timeline, the Colorado property purchase, the quitclaim deed, collectively tells a different story than the one he presented. It tells the story of a man whose professional conduct raised formal regulatory concern, whose clients described being re-traumatized rather than healed, and whose personal life unfolded in a way that appears to directly contradict the covenant theology he spent decades preaching to the couples who came to him for help. None of that is speculation. It is the documented record. And for the donors who gave to Daystar, the couples who spent thousands of dollars at heart-to-heart counseling, and the women who sat in his sessions and were told that forgiveness meant returning to marriages in which they had been systematically deceived, that record matters. Not as a verdict. No court has issued one. The Colorado Licensing Board issued admonitions but not revocations. The Colleyville police investigation into the child abuse allegations within the broader Lamb family was closed without charges in May 2025. The estate questions surrounding Joni Lamb's final asset restructuring remain open in the public domain. But patterns in accountability journalism, as in Scripture, eventually speak for themselves. The story of what happens to Daystar Television and to Doug Weiss's remaining presence on that platform is still developing. His Healing Time program continues to air. His show page remains active on Daystar's website as of the time this video was produced. The leadership question at Daystar remains unresolved. Jonathan Lamb's potential return, tied to what the Roy's Report documented as a reported dying wish from Joni, subsequently denied by board member Tom Callender within 48 hours of the funeral, has not been settled. The board that fired Jonathan Lamb in November 2024 remains in place. What is settled is the documentary record this video has walked through. The April 4th episode is gone. The divorce was filed 58 days after Marcus died. The Colorado property purchase predates the public acknowledgement of any relationship. The state board has twice found cause for formal disciplinary action. Former clients have described in named published accounts what sitting across from Doug Weiss in that Colorado Springs facility actually felt like. And 8 weeks before she died, Joni Lamb signed a legal document to remove him from a nearly $3 million property they owned together. That is not a rumor. That is the paper trail. The sources for every claim made in this video are linked in the description. The Roy's Report, Trinity Foundation, Public Colorado State Board records, public property filings, the Fort Worth Report. Review them yourself. Evaluate the record yourself. That is all this channel asks. This channel will continue following the documented record wherever it leads. Until next time, stay rooted, stay real, stay in the Word. God bless.